Hey everyone, it's Shaky Cam time. It's Sleepy Reader here with a handheld phone. I'm all hyped up on some way overpriced chocolate, but when you put chocolate in front of me, I spend too much money. And back for my second part of The Beautiful Room. The Beautiful Room is. A lot of people out there are a lot smarter than me and probably have been understanding Tom King's comics a lot better than I have. One clever person by the name of 64 Page Special, I believe, suggested that this Commandy Challenge that was by Tom King was kind of a metaphor for comics creation, that the room was comic book creation, and that I assume that speech he gives about how you go from one room to the next room to the next room, each with some, cliffhanger, and then you go to the next room, is a talk about comic book creation too. And I had totally never thought of that. I'm not sure if he was totally serious or I think half joking, half serious. But that was a really interesting thing to think about. And this whole ever expanding beautiful room idea, the beautiful room is empty for the full title that I'm drawing upon, kind of applies, I suppose, to that. Is the beautiful room of creativity empty, or the beautiful room of comics an empty place? I don't know. I'm just going to stumble my way through talking about some of the Mr. Miracles, the three Mr. Miracles that have come out. I think tomorrow the fourth one comes out, so I suppose I should have waited, but I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to do this now and try to keep plugging forward. So, I have several thoughts on Mr. Miracle. I don't know how well I can organize them, but I definitely was thinking. So, I mean, the concept of the beautiful room is empty. That title just popped into my head actually when I was in the middle of reading the game of jokes and riddles, but it somehow was strengthened in the middle of my reading of Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle is a beautifully produced comic, extremely creative visually, extremely creative structurally, ever inventive, pulling in the most indie of indie techniques. This is very much just pulling in so many sort of alternative ways of telling stories through the comic book medium that it's a pretty just amazing artifact. That alone would make it a beautiful room. I was struck by here with this page where it's just different pictures of this boy writing in this joke about now you know what God looks like, and there are pieces of tape on the pictures, and I don't know what else, these effects with the bubbles and the lines, so much effort put into the textures. And you would think this is scot-free because there's the little dots, like from his costume, that hold his cape. And it looks enough like him. But he would never have been in a classroom where they're drawing pictures, would they? This joke is a very good one, and is put to good use later in the comic. But just the fact that each picture is kind of taped down, I don't know. In another article I've talked about the fuzziness of memory, and this comic plays with fuzziness so much. I'm trying to find other parts, but there's that part, there it is, when he's doing his kind of miraculous, one of his escape routines. It really seems like a crime to have ads in the middle of this comic. And the fuzziness of the whole TV interview thing, like Glorious Godfrey, who I believe was someone who worked for Darkseid in the original comics. And then we get a scene of very sharp focus and awkward discussion with the father. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be skipping around here. Another really notable thing about this first issue is we've always had, but we get a super example of how Tom King and his collaborator use the rhythms of the page. It's almost like at times it seems like the comic book is just about the different rhythms you can put into a comic book page and the different ways, the different beats. And we've seen that a lot, like in that, there was a lot of that in that Swamp Thing with Gerard's also, which, and a lot of the rhythms displayed kind of an underlying humor. And any humor here is very dark, like the rhythm, the beat, is the humor of Scott Free getting beat up and getting up and getting beat up by Orion. And Orion is a very menacing figure. He's kind of Scott Free's brother, soon to be his high father, though. It's almost like this is the humor of childhood abuse, or the humor of PTSD. In the ever repeating and increasing dark side is, which apparently I'm told comes from something that Grant Morrison did in the Justice League of America at some point. So someday I guess I have to read that to know where that comes from. To me, I found it, the dark side is, I thought it was an original kind of thing, but the way it's done in these beats can portray so many different psychological states, whether it is a feeling of overwhelming panic, or a feeling of your world being taken over, or a feeling of the loss of control, or that there's some underlying thing that's coming to get you and you can't stop it. So this was a brilliant issue, but it made extremely clear, it said explicitly, when Darkseid has the anti-life equation, and Darkseid, and that will allow him to alter and control reality at his whim. And then Scott Free is having all these things that he thought he remembered now being different. Unless even that talk about Darkseid's having the anti-life equation and what he can do with the anti-life equation is not true, then we would conclude that all of what's happening is because Darkseid has the anti-life equation and he's controlling events, controlling reality, playing with the mind of, in this case, his adopted son, Mr. Miracle. And but that could be Mr. Miracle's sanity is questionable. Maybe he's hallucinating the whole thing about Darkseid changing reality. I guess that's the other possibility. But certainly the obvious, straightforward plot most obvious plot thing is Darkseid has changed reality, and that's what Scott Free is experiencing. Maybe because he's Mr. Miracle, and he's the escape artist who can't escape, and we've got it turned around on us. He's the escape artist who can't really escape, because you can't escape the abuse of your past, your abusive upbringing, I guess. I like to think that for some people they can escape their abusive upbringing, or their terrible experience in war or some other terrible experience, that they can transcend it. And maybe Tom King will eventually give us transcendence of that. Flashing back to the creative, the idea that the commanding room was like creativity. Another act of creativity in comics is that you always are taking over from the original creators. So in some sense, you are killing or abusing or in some other way manhandling the work of the previous creator. So is that why in that, I don't have it with me unfortunately, in that Batman comic we saw Alan Moore get killed? Because figuratively speaking, every time you take someone else's character and redo it, you're killing them, or you're killing a piece of their creativity. In here, there's lots of quotes from Jack Kirby at beginnings and ends of issues, which makes a great kind of counterpoint from the kind of pop flash of Jack Kirby from 1970 and 71 to the kind of disturbing, depressing realism, if you will, of this style of comic. But is it? And I've noticed throughout this that sort of like the way he did in The Vision, everything fits the original story, even though it has completely a different tone and feel and psychological weight than the original Jack Kirby stories. All of the details in here, as far as I can tell, fit within the scope of Kirby's original Fourth World comics. It's all logical. It's all a logical fit, despite feeling 180 degrees different. So in a way, he has undone Kirby, like he killed Alan Moore. He's undone Kirby. There's amazing stuff in this issue too, which seems to be about war and following leaders and obeying commands and all that sort of thing, which is very disturbing and intriguing, since those of us who follow the comic book press, Tom King has been very open about all his involvement as a CIA operative. I mean, he can't give details, it's all classified and stuff, but he's been in several fields of war working for the CIA in various parts of the world, inspired, he said, by the events of 9/11, and also kind of hinting that he always wanted to be a writer, and he felt like he should go out and have adventures and such to do so. And I'm sure I'm way oversimplifying and under-remembering all the stuff I've heard Tom King say in interviews about that. And we seem to be getting Orion becoming a very difficult and questionable leader. He's starting to resemble one of those more worse Roman emperors or something. All kinds of incredible beats. A really interesting appearance by Metron about the face of God. This is so different from most comics you would see published by DC Comics. It seems almost mind-bogglingly daring. And in another way, also, it's super dense and it's super decompressed, because events that happen here over pages and pages might have once been done in a panel, and whole issues here might have been a page or two. And then this is a spot-on Granny Goodness, but taken into a new, like I was saying before, it's totally true to the Kirby creation, and yet the flavor has become so different. Dark humor throughout. And then at the end, we have more intrigue. Granny warning Orion and claiming that she is the spy in working for Orion, and that Orion wants her to kill him, to get rid of him and Barda. But then we have Barda killing her. Amazingly put together scenes. So bizarre to have that scene, and then this Archie meets Harley and Ivy. Either totally unthinking by the editorial staff of DC or totally on purpose. But it's so amazing. But it's still, and again, it feels almost like abstraction, and I don't know, it doesn't feel quite like a story to me. Maybe because it's so compressed but decompressed at the same time. my brain has trouble grasping it as the concept of a story. And another thing is that that after issue 1, I thought we'd be exploring more this changing reality, but that for the moment has been dropped, and instead is more like a Game of Thrones or a game of cat and mouse. So it's kind of a spy game where who's telling the truth and who's the real mole or who's the double agent and that kind of thing, with that whole Granny Goodness stuff. And if you weren't sure that Granny Goodness was dead, we emphasize it even more by having a long scene of cutting off her head. So, what more to say? We got one more issue, and basically, that I'm looking at here, basically we hear this heart-wrenching story from Bug, and then Light Ray, of all people, comes along and just kills Bug. Mr. Miracle's hardly reacting. And this is all very anti-heroic. And perhaps this is the first beat where it feels a little off from Kirby, in the sense that Light Ray was kind of the peace person, the balance against Orion. And now if he's just doing whatever Orion wants him to, he's no longer that balance, that opposite, that yin to Orion's yang, or whatever. So, and then the Dark Side Is stuff comes back. Another thing that they do is they leave out the bits that Jack Kirby would have been put in, but focus for a long time on the bits that he probably would have skipped right over, like this long climb up into this trap that he has, and then the trap unfolds, and then the trap is done, but we aren't shown Mr. Miracle escaping. This is a beautiful, beautiful page. Very, very, very indie. Something that you might have seen, in some other form, form in a indie comic in the 90s or something, like a autobiographical comic or something. And then instead of showing, giving us the climax that you normally get when Mr. Miracle escapes, we just skip to a few hours later when he's sitting in a cafe, because we just know he's going to escape, right? And and it's this really weird juxtaposition where he's in this celebrity show business back again after having just come back from war. And then this is interesting because Glorious Godfrey is working for Orion. Is Orion really... Well, I've already spoiled everything here. I'm going to put a spoiler warning on the video. But is Orion... I'm wondering... Orion calls himself the face of God. I'm wondering if Darkseid has somehow occupied Orion's body, or Orion has just come to become Darkseid, I suppose. Is this an anti-war story? Is it an anti-power? Power corrupts. It's an incredible structure. It's just amazing, all the different things they do in these 3 issues. And it's got to come from both the artist and the writer. Gerard's is his sort of most avant-garde of collaborators, and they just have a field day with it. But they're so far telling us just little snippets of story, and maybe there's that whole modernist trick of showing little snippets that the whole of the story is outside of the frame, so to speak, of the story. So we got something more modernist in a way than anything I can remember Alan Moore doing. And by modernist, I mean the kind of fiction that was the more avant-garde fiction in the mid-20th century. Because then you got postmodern. To me, this doesn't feel postmodern. Postmodern would be the kind of thing where it's a comic and we know it and we don't pretend, it's a commentary on comics. So it may have a postmodern underthread, but it's more modernistic in all these fancy techniques and everything. That's probably stretching my literary knowledge a bit far here, but I've still kind of wonder, well, what's come after postmodern? I don't know. In visual arts, I think the next things moved on from abstract art, which might be like their version of modern, to the Andy Warhol kind of stuff, which might have been modern visual arts version of postmodern. Then the last I knew, they were doing installations and things like that, which was kind of a left turn away from that line of progression from Impressionism on through all the different modern periods. But this has a lot in common with the whole Andy Warhol, Jasper Johns world of modern art, which is no longer that modern, but mid to late 20th century art, I suppose. Like I was seeing Jasper Johns at the university where my father worked in the 70s, so I don't know if he's still a name anyone knows about. But so I kind of thrilled to see what they do next, and dread what they do next, because it's this beautiful room seems empty because it's even more an expression of depression and hopelessness, and there being no good, it seems like, and no way out. Mr. Miracle seems totally trapped. But then again, he is the super escape artist. So in this one, I cannot predict where it's going. I thought, it was going in the Dark Side's Controlling Reality, but we're only 3 issues in a 12 issue series. So it's very exciting on that level. People are talking about it being greater than, even on the very first issue came out, and they're saying, oh, it's going to be better than The Vision. And I don't know if, I don't in my gut feel that at the moment, but it might prove to be. But the Vision series that Tom King did over at Marvel, which was a 12 issue series also, it had a shape to it from the very beginning. And this one seems more like a shapeshifter, the story is shifting and shifting, and the sense of it really going anywhere, or having the Vision had a warmth to it under the cool eye, the cool modernist techniques. There was more emotion and hope and connection to it. And I don't know, it's just a story that had angles you could warm up to, even though it was a very, very grim story too. So I don't know if I'm still recording because it says low power mode. I guess I am. So I will be back in another day or two with part 3, where I ramble my way through this idea of The Beautiful Room is Empty, with the focus being on the recent Batman arc, The War of Jokes and Riddles, where I will postulate, I will wonder, and I guess this is already making me wonder, does Tom King like superheroes? Does he, or more from the point of view of here, where this is, everything's a trap and a horrible kind of thing, does he believe in superheroes? Does he believe superheroes are possible? Can he bring himself to do a superhero story and, have fighting the good fight, the powerful protect the weak, and it all work out in the end? Can he back that kind of story, which is the staple of Marvel and DC comics and many other superhero comics, of course? So I will ponder that some more. Talk to you all later.